Welcome back to Close Up, and we're getting right back into our extended conversation with Senator Maggie Hassan. Again, Senator, thanks for coming in on this Sunday morning.
Nice to be here.
Let's talk some politics at all. Do you think it's a problem for Democrats that you guys haven't found anyone of a high-profile nature to run for mayor of Manchester yet?
Look, Democrats need to be throughout the state, throughout the country, talking about the priorities that the people of New Hampshire have and working to address them. And I am sure we have a good bench in New Hampshire, we have a good bench in Manchester. We will make sure that we are drawing clear distinctions during all elections about the difference between Democrats who want to listen to constituents, address the challenges they face, work in a constructive way to move the country, the city, the state forward, and Republicans who are actively trying to take away critical services from our neighbors in need while giving tax breaks to the very wealthiest among us and to corporate special interests. And I think that, along with their failure to stand up to Donald Trump on things like tariffs and the rule of law, will be a very clear distinction for voters to consider.
You know, a lot of folks in your party feel like you guys have the momentum right now, but that's not materializing in this key early test kind of bellwether thing. There's that set of urban policies that have not done so well around the country that voters have soundly rejected. A pretty good chunk of the Democratic base still believes that's morally correct in terms of the homelessness and the criminal justice stuff. You can see how a moderate candidate could get caught in a bad spot here where maybe they don't line up with the way the Democratic base is right now. Is that what's going on?
What I know we need to do throughout this country on issues like homelessness is, among other things, build more housing. And that's one of the things that we really have an opportunity to look at the policies and procedures that we have in cities like Manchester, in cities and towns around the state and around the country to make sure that we are transparently and with local control investing in the kind of housing we see in parts of the country where there is more housing and lower cost housing, less homelessness. And that's one of the things we really have to focus on, along with mental health and addiction treatment, which again is at risk with this administration. What I hope Granite Staters know by now is that when we passed Medicaid expansion back in 2014, there was a provision that said if the federal government reimburses the state at less than the 90% that it did back then, and it has promised going forward, our Medicaid expansion program ends completely. That means that 7,000 people or so in New Hampshire who are getting their addiction treatment through Medicaid expansion suddenly are without care. That's the kind of policy that this administration is driving that will hurt Manchester, it will hurt New Hampshire, and it's something we have to stop.
Let's talk about that HHS clawback, the $80 million that was taken away out of the current budget in some cases. You know, we've heard this has caused a lot of disruption. Some of the community health centers have already had to lay some people off. There's apparently a public safety component to this as well.
Yeah, some of that money is about training first responders. Some of it is about mental health treatment. But look, the federal government, this administration, decided to claw back $80 million from New Hampshire. That was money that was already promised, appropriated, committed to New Hampshire. A number of other states sued the Trump administration for that clawback, and because they filed the lawsuit, the court has given them relief, and they are getting the money back. New Hampshire didn't join the lawsuit, and as a result, right now, we still don't have that money back. It impacts public safety, it impacts public health, especially mental health and addiction services, and it's wrong. And it's the type of thing that we all need to stand up and push back against, including at the state level.
Yeah, do you think Governor Kelly Ayotte needs to be more aggressive here? Or having looked around the country at governors who try to stand up to the administration, they end up in perhaps a worse scenario sometimes with punitive measures coming in. So do you think the governor should be pushing harder?
Well, look, what I know is that in states where attorney generals have filed lawsuits, that money has come back. I know the importance for every governor to fight for her state, and I think we all have to stand up for New Hampshire.
The Trump administration, as you've noted, is cutting all kinds of staff across the board. Social Security office in Littleton is one that's slated for closure. There have also been some reports of issues with benefits for seniors and whatnot. You know, are they getting timely response and service from the Social Security Administration right now?
Let's just take a step back and think about what this administration has said and done about Social Security. Social Security is a program that has been in place for about 90 years, and over the course of those first 90 years, benefits have been delivered on time, and generally speaking in the correct amount. Occasional mistakes, our office would hear about that occasionally, but for 90 years it's worked well. Elon Musk comes in and calls it, out of the blue, a Ponzi scheme, and says he wants to cut from, I think it's Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security about $700 billion. Then they list a whole bunch of offices for closure, Littleton being one of them, and they start laying off workers. And for a while, they refuse to allow people to verify their identity and their benefits over the phone, something that has been in place with security precautions for quite some time. What that has done is resulted in more delays. If you go to Social Security office in person, if you try to call them, it's taking longer to get your calls answered. My office has had repeated instances where people tell us they're either getting checks in the wrong amount, their checks are arriving late, or they're getting notices that their benefits have been suspended. And they're told that the reason is that the Social Security Administration suddenly needs more information. They're not necessarily told what information, and when they try to call and find out, they can't get anybody on the phone. This is a real problem, and the Littleton office is the northernmost office in New Hampshire. So if they do close that office, which they now are hemming and hawing about, but they still haven't promised us they won't, that means some North Country seniors would have to drive 100 miles to the nearest New Hampshire Social Security office. That again is untenable, and it's wrong. This is a lifeline for our seniors and for people with disabilities. These are benefits that people have paid into and earned. And so the administration needs to, full stop, stop targeting Social Security and start working on the problems that the American people want them to work on.
On the Homeland Security front, FEMA is also facing a little bit of a reset as well. We saw Arkansas not get a disaster declaration, even though the governor there is very close with the president. We hear the metric for disaster relief is changing potentially as well. How will that impact New Hampshire, where we've seen every summer for the last few years some, I think what people wouldn't say major disasters, but certainly ones that qualify currently?
Well, I am really concerned about this because obviously New Hampshire has 234 separate cities and towns. We are a small state, but even a disaster that by a big state standards wouldn't add up to a lot of money can devastate a town's budget. And we have always worked with the federal government to make sure that we are addressing the needs of local communities in the face of disaster. We don't always get the declarations we hope for. We don't always get quite as much money or help as we need. There are things we can do to improve FEMA, to be sure, and streamline the process. And I've got a bill in that would help lower administrative costs and spread them further for FEMA. But what we really need to do, again, is talk about the partnership that local, state, and federal government have had in responding to disasters. None of us want the kind of suffering and economic disaster that comes after a fire or a flood or a hurricane or these sudden rainstorms that have been washing out towns and structures in New Hampshire. None of us want that kind of human suffering to go unaddressed, and this is where coming together as a country has been one of our strengths to help each other out in these times of need. So I'm hoping again that the administration will learn more about what FEMA actually does and why it's so important to help communities get up and running as quickly as they can after a disaster. And I hope they'll reverse course, and I'll keep speaking out against it.
As we wrap up here, Senator, sort of a legend in New Hampshire passed away this last week, Justice David Souter. He was of a different generation, but you got to interact with him a little bit. What are your recollections of Justice Souter? So
first of all, what a kind and gentle man, and I say that he was always incredibly kind to me. I actually did the ceremonial swearing in for my first Senate term, which I was just really honored by. And he also, as a jurist, was unbelievably smart, brilliant man, but also true to his Granite State values, open-minded, willing to listen to facts, which is, of course, what good judges do, really learn from the cases before them and apply the law with an open mind, without a predetermined result. And because of that, I think he was really a remarkable jurist who represented the New Hampshire ethos of being open-minded and being constructive, and really respecting our values and our laws. I think he'll go down as a really superb justice.
And a classic Granite Stater for sure. All
for
right.
sure.
Senator Hassan, thanks so much for spending time with us here. Happy Mother's Day, and to all the moms out there, thanks for being here.
And happy Mother's Day to everybody, too.
All right. And we'll be right back with Governor Kelly Ayotte and what kind of redevelopment she wants to see at the liquor store properties along I-95.